Hey guys, tonight we're dusting off our most questionable face powder and plunging headfirst into the perilous world of Victorian beauty products. A world where your skincare routine could literally kill you, your hair could catch fire at any moment, and your teeth-whitening paste might be just as effective as eating a handful of gravel. So before you get cozy, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Now, dim those lights, turn on your fan for that authentic Victorian fog effect, snuggle into your bed, and pretend you're safe from Mercury shampoo. You're about to discover a time when natural beauty meant you barely survived the week. Let's pause for a second. Have you ever wondered how Victorians achieved that perfect ghostly complexion? Or why their eyebrows sometimes fell out mid-conversation? Did anyone really use lead on their face? And why did they keep doing it after their skin started peeling off in sheets? Was the quest for a smaller waist worth the price of a dislocated rib? And how would you keep your breath fresh enough to avoid fainting from the smell of not having brushed your teeth in months? Congratulations. You've just woken up in Victorian England. The year is 1872. Your bathroom cabinet is a ticking time bomb. Your lipstick is made of carmine beetles. Your hairbrush is infested with mystery powder. You have a formal invitation to the most dangerous part of high society, the boudoir. Good luck. The rooster crows, the smog rolls in, and you awaken in your chilly Victorian bedroom. Your face feels sticky, your pillow smells vaguely of mutton tallow, and you reach for your face sponge, a dried sea creature that has seen better centuries. Welcome to the Victorian morning routine, where the first step is always ignore the rash. Let's set the scene. The wallpaper is an eye-watering shade of arsenic green. The air carries a fine hint of coal smoke and last night's boiled cabbage. And your bed is, let's be honest, mostly a sack of feathers, dreaming of being an actual mattress. Your hair is in a state somewhere between regrettable and structurally unsound. You sit up, careful not to snag your nightgown on the exposed spring that's been threatening you for the last 6 months. Congratulations, you're officially awake, which is more than can be said for your left foot, now completely numb from sleeping in an awkward tangle of petticoats. First, you pat your face. Is it still there? Yes. But it's now delicately coated in a mixture of last night's cold cream, industrial soot, and the residual oils of every candle ever burned in your room. You look in the mirror, a blurry oval of wobbly glass that flatters no one, and note with relief that your eyebrows haven't migrated in the night. Your complexion, however, looks less porcelain doll and more statue in need of restoration. No worries, that's what makeup is for. Or, as the Victorians called it, a fresh start and a new rash. Time for the face wash. Your water pitcher is heavy, the water inside is icy, and you know from experience it's never been entirely free of mystery particles. The soap is lye-based, hard as a brick, and smells faintly of old cheese. But it does the trick, meaning it strips away the top layer of skin, leaving you feeling refreshed, which is Victorian for slightly raw and alarmingly pink. If you want to get fancy, you reach for rose water, which is either a floral luxury or, depending on your budget, just regular water with a dead rose petal floating in it for effect. Next up, the hair. Victorian hair is an all-day event. First, you try to tame it with a bone comb that seems to resent you personally. Every stroke releases a blizzard of powder, old pomade, and possibly a beetle or two. If you're fashionable, your hair is long, heavy, and mostly pinned up in a style that requires a physics degree and at least 3 decorative combs. If you're less fortunate, you just hope it doesn't break off in clumps, a sign your latest hair-restoring tonic is working its usual magic, i.e., slow, embarrassing baldness. Now, onto the teeth. You dip your brush, a stick with bristles that looks suspiciously like pig's hair, into a tin of tooth powder. It tastes of chalk, salt, and something called prepared charcoal, which sounds healthy until you realize it's just soot. You scrub away, wincing as you hit a sensitive spot, which in Victorian England is every single tooth. There's no mouthwash, but you can chew on a clove if you want your breath to smell less like despair. Then comes the beauty ritual itself. You reach for your powder tin, careful not to inhale too deeply lest you accidentally ingest the main ingredient, arsenic. A delicate tap of rouge follows, made from crushed insects, and a pinch of mercury for that signature dangerously radiant look. The entire effect is completed with a quick dab of lip colour, because nothing says ready for the day like a mouth tinged a suspicious shade of red. You pull on your corset with the help of your housemaid, inhale as much as the smog allows, and squeeze into a dress featuring more buttons than a haberdasher's fever dream. As you glide into the drawing room, head spinning gently from lack of oxygen, you're finally presentable. You've made it through the Victorian morning routine. Your skin is tingling, your lungs are protesting, and your hair is probably flammable, but you look, by contemporary standards, perfectly lovely. And best of all, if you can survive this, you can survive anything the day throws at you, up to and including your arsenic face powder crumbling into your tea. Good luck. A flawless white face isn't just fashionable, it's a status symbol. To achieve it, you'll need layers of lead-based foundation, a dusting of arsenic powder, and a willingness to develop chronic fatigue. Looking like a marble statue is all the rage. Feeling like one? Unavoidable. Let's paint the picture. You, a respectable Victorian, wake up in the morning and squint into your warped mirror. Your goal for the day is to look as if you haven't been outside since the invention of the cloud. Tanned skin? Absolutely scandalous. Only people who actually worked for a living had colour in their cheeks. You want your face so white it could guide ships through the fog. The only glow you're aiming for is ethereal or, failing that, freshly laundered bedsheet. So, how do you begin? The centerpiece of your arsenal is Venetian ceruse, a fancy name for a paste made of white lead and vinegar, helpfully imported at great expense and immediate risk to your health. You open the little pot, the fumes hit you, and your eyes water slightly, but that's normal. With a delicate ivory spatula, or just your fingers, which will be numb soon anyway, you slather on the thick, cold paste. It glides over blemishes, freckles, and every hint of humanity, smoothing your face into a blank Victorian canvas. It also seeps quietly into your pores, kick-starting a slow-motion revolt by your entire immune system. Once the lead is set, you reach for your arsenic face powder, because one poison is never enough. A gentle dusting fixes your foundation and provides an extra layer of coverage, plus a faint tingling sensation that means it's working. Friends may tell you how radiant you look. What they mean is you now resemble a haunted turnip. But this is a compliment. The best part? Your transformation is public proof that you're rich enough to stay indoors all day, never labouring in the sun, never picking up anything heavier than a teaspoon. Pale skin equals wealth, leisure, and, possibly, the early symptoms of anemia. But that's a problem for future you. Your cheeks, of course, can't be too healthy. Rosiness would betray you as a robust type. So, after your powder, you take a minute to conceal any suspicious colour. Sometimes that means reapplying more lead or even dabbing on a bit of blue paint to mimic fashionable veins. If you've done it right, you'll look less like a person and more like someone caught in a snowstorm while reading a tragic novel. Now, keep in mind, beauty is suffering. After a week of this routine, your skin develops the texture of a gently used chalkboard, peeling, flaking, and the occasional weeping sore. All perfectly normal, but don't panic. Victorian magazines suggest simply applying another layer of ceruse. Eventually, the lead will helpfully destroy your sebaceous glands, so you won't have to worry about oily skin ever again. Side effects may include insomnia, headaches, and forgetting your own middle name. By midday, your flawless face has begun to crack around the corners, especially if you smile or try to eat soup. This is why the most elegant Victorian women developed a distant, unsmiling air. It wasn't pride, just strategic face management. Don't touch your cheeks, don't rub your nose, and for the love of all things holy, never stand too close to an open fire. Cerussi is famously combustible, and there's nothing like a sudden cosmetic meltdown to ruin afternoon tea. Social pressure is relentless. Friends will judge you by the whiteness of your complexion, and critics will whisper if your powder is too thick, too thin, or, worst of all, uneven. Husbands will fret if you begin to lose hair or faint at the dinner table, but only because it means your beauty routine needs tweaking, not because you're being gently poisoned by your own reflection. So tonight, as you scrub away the day's triumphs and tragedies with coarse soap and lukewarm water, you might notice the faint outline of your true face peeking through, red, raw, and yearning for fresh air. Ignore it. Tomorrow, you'll be a marble statue again, radiant and refined, one thin layer away from medically fascinating. Imagine opening your makeup kit and choosing between quick death white and slow decline ivory. Victorian beauty powders promised radiant skin and often delivered only lifelong nerve damage. On the plus side, at least you'll be too numb to feel embarrassment. Let's get right to it. The ideal Victorian vanity looks less like a cosmetics shelf and more like a toxicology exhibit. Rows of tins, pots, and dainty glass bottles, all meticulously labelled with delicate, gilded script. Because if you're going to slowly poison yourself, you might as well do it with style. Your choices are both simple and horrifying. Do you go with the classic Ceruse, lead carbonate, with a hint of vinegar and a bouquet of what's that smell? Or do you try one of the modern innovations, like arsenic-laced finishing powder, that promises to leave your skin ethereal and smooth, which it absolutely does, until it also leaves your nervous system erratic and non-functional? Step 1. Preparation. You carefully scoop a little powder onto a rabbit, hair puff, tap off the excess and pat it gently on your face. There's a soft cloud of dust in the air, a beautiful, shimmering haze of heavy metals. Take a deep breath and enjoy the tingling sensation as the powder settles into your pores, your lungs, and possibly your immortal soul. This is the true secret to Victorian elegance. An immune system so confused it doesn't know whether to panic or just give up. It's not just women either. Gentlemen dab powder on their foreheads to look less like they've spent all day in a gin shop. Stage actors, those glamorous celebrities of the Victorian world, slather on even more, caking their features into a sort of porcelain death mask designed to survive the blazing gaslights and the accidental collapse of the set. Even children's makeup exists, for those special occasions when you want your 8-year-old to radiate ghostly pallor and mild arsenic toxicity. Of course, these powders are multi-purpose. They cover up everything: pimples, scars, freckles, rashes, especially the ones you got from using last week's powder, and any hints of actual human warmth. If you're lucky, the only thing you'll notice is an occasional headache or a faint metallic taste at the back of your throat. If you're less lucky, you'll wake up with swelling, peeling skin, and an inexplicable sense of existential dread. The medical profession is, predictably, not much help. Doctors have begun to notice a strange uptick in cases of skin malaise, general fatigue, and persistent twitching. Their solution? Perhaps you're just not using the right powder, or perhaps you need a vacation to the seaside, where the bracing winds can blow the lead flakes directly into your neighbour's breakfast. If you travel in fashionable circles, you learn to recognize the telltale signs of heavy powder use: the brittle hair, the permanently chapped lips, the tendency to faint dramatically at the least provocation. In fact, swooning is such a frequent occurrence at parties that fainting couches become standard household decor. "She's not being melodramatic," whispers your aunt. "She just forgot to open the window before applying her arsenic veil." There's also the added problem of application. One false move with your powder puff, and you've left a trail of chalky fingerprints on your best black dress. or a fine dusting of lead all over the tea cakes. Guests begin to cough politely. Someone suggests moving the conversation outdoors. You contemplate blaming the cat. By the end of the day, your skin feels strangely tight, your eyes are watering, and you're beginning to suspect that the healthy glow advertised in Ladies' Home Companion is actually just the fever from mild systemic poisoning. Still, you soldier on. After all, no one wants to be the only woman at the ball with a bare face, looking suspiciously alive. As you finally scrub your face raw with harsh soap and water, you make yourself a silent promise to try the new non-toxic powder next week. It's made from rice starch and pearl dust. Safe, surely, except for the trace mercury and whatever mystery ingredient gives it that alluring shine. For now, you settle into bed, face tingling, mind swirling, and makeup bag safely tucked away, ready for tomorrow's touch-up. If you can remember your own name in the morning, you're already ahead of the curve. A healthy flush was a must, but nothing says alluring like dabbing crushed beetles or toxic mercury salts on your cheeks. Don't worry, you can always reapply when it inevitably sweats off, usually just before you faint. Blush, in the Victorian world, is not simply a matter of pinching your cheeks and hoping for the best. No, it's a full-scale chemical adventure. Looking naturally healthy was completely out of style. What you wanted was the kind of colour that made people question if you'd just returned from a brisk walk or barely survived a tragic opera. Enter rouge, a product that sounds much more romantic than face irritant in a jar. This is the finishing touch, the grand reveal, the moment where you get to say, yes, I spent all morning poisoning myself. But don't I look delightful? Let's talk ingredients. There's carmine, made from dried and crushed cochineal beetles. Yes, you heard right. You're carefully swirling your brush in a tin of bug dust, imported from South America, to achieve that signature "I've just seen a ghost, but it was a handsome one" hue. If you're particularly well off, you might have rouge based on mercuric sulfide, also known as vermilion. It provides a beautiful scarlet colour and a not-so-beautiful side effect. Gradual, gentle poisoning. But what's a little tremor in your hand compared to rosy cheeks? Application is an art. You sit at your dressing table, light streaming in through arsenic green curtains, and swirl your fingertip in the rouge. Too much, and you look like you've just lost a boxing match. Too little, and you risk being accused of insufficient femininity, a fate worse than mild asphyxiation. The key is to achieve the soft bloom of youth, which ironically can only be accomplished by rubbing insect powder and mineral toxins into your pores. Some of the more creative DIY recipes are even less encouraging. Out of carmine? Why not try a dab of red wine mixed with crushed strawberries, or just red brick dust, if you're feeling thrifty and enjoy the taste of regret? Housewives' guides recommend rubbing your cheeks briskly with a rough towel to bring the blood to the surface. This works, assuming you don't mind showing up to the parlour with a look best described as freshly flayed. Of course, all this effort faces one relentless adversary: sweat. Victorian homes are rarely warm, but corsets, layers of petticoats, and the constant terror of social interaction will do wonders for your internal temperature. By noon, your artfully applied blush has slid halfway down your face, leaving streaks that would make a clown jealous. Not to worry, though. Discreetly, you slip away to the powder room for an emergency touch-up, delicately ignoring the possibility that the bloom you're restoring is now blended with trace amounts of your breakfast. Social danger is everywhere. Apply too much and you risk the scorn of your peers. Painted is she? They'll whisper, which is Victorian for trying too hard. But go without, and you're doomed to look wan, sickly, and suspiciously honest. There's a delicate balance between looking ready for the ball and looking ready for a séance. Let's not forget the men. While women cornered the rouge market, men who worked in the theatre, or just had a taste for the dramatic, would sometimes borrow a dab for themselves. The result? A sharp cheekbone, a little extra confidence, and a slightly increased chance of mercury poisoning. Even Queen Victoria's favourite stage actors sported suspiciously crimson faces, their secret as thinly veiled as their foundation. At the end of the day, you scrub your cheeks with soap that smells vaguely of goat and hope your skin forgives you by morning. Is it worth it? For that fleeting, fashionable flush? Absolutely. Because nothing says alive and thriving in Victorian England like cheeks that glow with a secret only you and your apothecary share. Thick hair was in, but the methods were out. Victorians slathered their scalps with bear grease, lead combs, and mysterious restorative tonics, many of which worked wonders on rats. As for humans, expect sudden bald patches and lingering regret. To set the scene, it's morning. Your hair is determined to defy gravity in several unsanctioned directions, and the latest beauty pamphlet is promising luscious locks if you simply follow its step-by-step instructions and ignore the chemical burns. Hair was the crowning glory in Victorian society. Whether you identified as a noble lady, an aspiring poet, or just someone trying to get invited to tea, a thick, glossy mane was your passport to respectability and, hopefully, marriage. Unfortunately, the average Victorian scalp was more battleground than garden. The first weapon in your arsenal is bear grease. That's right, actual grease from actual bears. If you couldn't source an obliging grizzly, lard or goose fat would do. You rub the greasy concoction into your scalp, massaging with fingers already sticky from last night's cold cream. This is supposed to nourish the hair follicles, but mostly it leaves you smelling like you've lost a fight with a butcher shop. And if you think animal fat is the strangest part of your morning, just wait. The next miracle tool is the lead comb. Advertised as a 2-in-1 detangler and hair tonic, lead combs infuse the scalp with strength, which is 19th century code for deposit a healthy film of toxic metal directly onto your head. If you're lucky, you'll get a touch of lead poisoning. If you're less lucky, you'll notice your part widening faster than your social circle is shrinking. And let's not forget the endless bottles of hair restoratives and elixirs. These tonics came in apothecary bottles, each promising the hair of a Grecian goddess, or, at minimum, the ability to cover a bald spot in less than a fortnight. Ingredients included everything from brandy and camphor to opium and cantharides, otherwise known as Spanish fly, a traditional blistering agent. Nothing gets the blood flowing to your scalp like the constant risk of chemical warfare breaking out on your head. There are also the home remedies, Victorian ingenuity at its best and worst. Rub a cut onion on your scalp. Wash your hair in rainwater, but only if collected under a waxing moon. Apply an egg yolk and molasses mask for shine and vigour, and try not to attract wasps on your walk to the market. Some books suggest vigorous brushing, up to 100 strokes a night. This works well provided you enjoy the sound of static and the gentle snowfall of dandruff onto your nightgown. If you are truly desperate, you might even purchase a scalp stimulator, a device that resembles a medieval torture implement and is supposed to rouse dormant follicles. It's basically a spiky brush designed to scrape away your worries and sometimes your skin. There's even a brisk market for wigs, hairpieces and switches, the 19th century version of extensions, artfully woven to cover the shame of a thinning crown. But beware, a poorly anchored hairpiece can betray you at the worst moment, such as during a waltz or in a sudden gust of cold-choked London wind. Results are predictably underwhelming. After weeks of application, your hair might feel softer, but only because most of it is now in your hairbrush. You notice odd tingling sensations, perhaps a small rash, and definitely the growing suspicion that your scalp has begun to rebel. Meanwhile, that restorative you purchased from a travelling salesman turns out to work wonders on your pet mouse, who now boasts the glossiest fur in the household. But don't worry, Victorian society was so invested in illusion, everyone else is faking it too. Just keep your head high and hat higher, avoid strong breezes, and remember, if all else fails, you can always join a poetry club and blame your baldness on artistic sensitivity. In the battle against baldness, nobody wins except the hat makers. Let's talk about Victorian hairstyling. Red-hot curling irons heated over open flames, pomades with the consistency of glue, and the very real risk of igniting your own head at the breakfast table. Bad hair day? Try bad hair decade. Welcome to the pre-electric era of hair care, where every attempt at beauty feels like a small science experiment gone wrong. Your daily hair routine starts with a choice. Do you want ringlets, waves, or the less popular crispy fringe of regret? Victorian society worshipped elaborate hairstyles, with cascading curls and sculpted updos topping the wish list for every fashionable woman. If you didn't want to look like you just crawled out of a haystack, you had to work for it. And by work, I mean brave open flames before breakfast. First up, the curling iron, a tool both essential and vaguely menacing. Forget the plug-in safety features of modern gadgets. These are solid metal rods that you stick straight into the heart of the fireplace, hoping to achieve warm, not glowing as your ideal temperature. You're basically wielding a branding iron, except instead of marking cattle, you're gently toasting your own hair. If you're lucky, you pull out the iron at just the right moment, hot enough to shape your curls, not so hot that it fuses hair and scalp into a Victorian soufflé. If you're unlucky, you find out what burning hair smells like before your first cup of tea. Once you've risked third-degree burns and possibly set off the early morning smoke alarm, otherwise known as the family screaming, it's time to set those curls in place. Enter pomade. A waxy, sticky, and suspiciously glossy substance made from bear fat, suet, or, if you're feeling posh, musk oil. The texture is somewhere between candle left in the sun and early-stage glue trap. You work it through your hair with a comb that's probably also made of bone or wood, hoping to achieve shine and staying power. Realistically, you achieve a look best described as windswept but unyielding. If you can still move your fringe after application, you didn't use enough. Hairpins and ribbons follow, and if you're feeling extra ambitious, you'll attempt an elaborate updo worthy of Queen Victoria herself. This requires several mirrors, a tolerant housemaid, and nerves of steel. Each twist, braid, and coil is secured with sharp pins and perhaps a prayer or two. For the truly dedicated, some styles call for fake hair rats, small cushions of real or artificial hair, used to pad out buns and chignons. You have not lived until you've chased a hair rat across the breakfast table because the cat thought it was dinner. But back to the heat. There is, naturally, an arms race among young ladies for the most dramatic curls. Some even attempt double iron techniques, one curling iron in each hand, both heated to unknown internal temperatures, and the unspoken hope that you won't accidentally press one to your ear. Victorian magazines warn against curling irons that are too fierce, helpfully advising, if your iron glows red, allow it to cool lest your hair fall away as autumn leaves. In other words, if you can see your reflection in the iron, you have 5 seconds to decide between style and scalp. For those blessed with stubbornly straight hair, desperation leads to innovation. Homemade recipes for curl setting include everything from sugar water and gelatin to beer, and alarming but true, a light dab of glue. Results vary. But if you've ever tried to sleep with sticky ringlets attached to your cheek, you know that the price of beauty is a night of haunted dreams. Of course, the risk doesn't end after breakfast. Victorian homes are filled with open flames, candles, lamps, fireplaces, and all that pomade and bear fat is flammable enough to double as emergency tinder. So as you parade your sculpted coiffure through the house, you're always one stray spark away from becoming the cautionary tale of the week. In summary, Victorian hair was less about fashion and more about survival. If you managed to style it, avoid a singed scalp, and make it through the day without smelling of smoke or mutton, you weren't just stylish, you were a survivor. Perfume isn't just a fragrance, it's an experiment in chemical warfare. Alcohol, whale vomit, and turpentine combine for scents that last longer than your dinner guests or your brain cells. Let's begin at your Victorian dressing table, where a dizzying array of mysterious bottles awaits. Each promises to transform you from human who has not bathed in days to walking garden of delight. If your definition of delight includes faint notes of nail polish remover and the lingering aroma of dead sea monsters, Victorians were obsessed with masking every natural scent, Personal hygiene was more theory than practice, so perfume wasn't just a luxury, it was a public health strategy. The day starts with a decision. Do you want to smell like lavender fields, or would you prefer the bold confidence of eau d'industrial solvent? You reach for the most elegant bottle, a cut glass marvel, the stopper still sticky from the last time you tried to open it. Inside, a cocktail of alcohol, floral oils, and something labeled ambergris. This is whale vomit, prized for its ability to make scents last for days, possibly weeks, and depending on the wind, well into the next century. Next up, musk. The real stuff comes from the glands of a small frightened deer, blended into perfumes that guarantee animal magnetism and, occasionally, lawsuits from the local wildlife. But if you're not feeling quite so feral, there's always the new synthetic musk, a laboratory invention that promises all the allure with none of the animal cruelty, though with an extra side of headache. Victorian perfumers weren't known for restraint. If a little jasmine was good, a bucket was better. Sillage, the trail of scent you leave in your wake, wasn't measured in feet, but in city blocks. Drench yourself with abandon, walk through the house. By the time you reach the parlour, half your relatives are tearing up, emotionally, yes, but also literally. The truly daring spritz a bit on their handkerchief, so they can sneak a whiff throughout the day. Especially helpful when you're forced to share a carriage with Uncle Ernest and his natural musk. Let's not forget the hidden dangers. Turpentine, benzene, and even arsenic found their way into cheaper perfumes. That lovely bottle from the apothecary down the road? It might contain a dash of industrial spirits, a pinch of mysterious powder, and the subtle promise of mild hallucinations. No matter, if you're lucky, you'll merely feel lightheaded. If not, you'll pass out and miss Aunt Maud's 90-minute monologue about her bunions. Perfume wasn't just for personal use, either. Victorian households bombarded their interiors with sachets, pomanders, and cologne-soaked linens. Bedrooms smelled of roses and wood polish. Wardrobes gave off notes of cedar and formaldehyde. Even the family dog was sometimes treated to a dab behind the ears. After all, nothing says aristocrat like a beagle that smells faintly of heliotrope and regret. Of course, the social stakes were high. Arrive at a party unperfumed, and you risk whispers about your hygiene. Wear too much. And you're that person, eyes watering, crowd parting before you. Host quietly opening windows. It was a delicate balance, a high-stakes gamble in a world where fresh was more aspiration than reality. Some Victorians even believed that perfume could guard against disease, especially during outbreaks of cholera or influenza. Doctors recommended scented vinegar, or Four Thieves blend, as a kind of wearable force field. Just don't inhale too deeply, you might discover the real reason they called it the vapors. So, as you finish your morning routine, you take one last brave spritz and steel yourself for the day. You are fragrant, you are possibly flammable, and you are absolutely ready to face the world, nose held high, trailing an invisible cloud of mystery, elegance, and low-level toxicity. In Victorian England, that's not just survival, it's an art form. Smile. Or don't. Tooth powder was mostly chalk, soot, and sometimes brick dust. Toothpaste tubes didn't exist, but gum disease certainly did. If your teeth survived, congratulations, they're probably not yours. Let's step into your Victorian bathroom, which is really just a washstand in the corner of your freezing bedroom. Your first order of business, oral hygiene, a phrase that in Victorian times meant do your best, then apologize to your dentist in the afterlife. Dental care was a battle waged daily, armed with whatever materials you could find in the back of the pantry, on the hearth, or in the nearest construction site. You start your day with a tin of tooth powder. Whitening, it claims, but only because it's the colour of wall plaster. Main ingredients: chalk, burnt bread, soot, and, if you're feeling luxurious, a pinch of powdered oyster shell or brick dust. Some versions even included cuttlefish bone or, for that authentic crunch, a little sand. The instructions are clear. Dip your brush, a stick with bristles, or a frayed bit of cloth, into the tin and scrub away as if you're trying to erase last night's regrets. The sensation is immediate and memorable. A dry, gritty taste that lingers at the back of your mouth, like the memory of childhood trauma. You grind the brush back and forth, hoping to polish away stains without scraping off too much enamel. Some powders contain a bit of salt or peppermint oil to freshen the breath, which they do if you believe that fresh means reminiscent of licking a sidewalk. Toothpaste tubes? Not yet invented. If you're truly posh, you might own a small pot of thick, sweet-smelling toothpaste made from honey, bicarbonate of soda, and sometimes a mystery ingredient that will turn out to be dangerous in about 50 years. For everyone else, it's all about the powder, the elbow grease, and the hope that the neighbor's dog doesn't mistake your brush for a chew toy. Of course, dental problems are never far behind. Toothaches are as common as tea, and there's no Novocaine waiting in the wings. A rotten tooth could mean weeks of throbbing pain, culminating in a visit to the barber surgeon, the cheerful fellow who will yank the offending molar out with pliers, zero anesthetic, and a strong right arm. Bleeding and fainting are normal, and if you're lucky, the barber will offer you a swig of gin and a clean rag to bite down on. If not, he'll just tell you to be brave while humming a hymn. Let's not forget gum disease. Inflamed, receding, and prone to bleeding at the slightest provocation, Victorian gums were a marvel of medical neglect. Mouthwash options included salt water, strong vinegar, or, if you were feeling fancy, a splash of brandy. None of these did much to cure gingivitis, but they all stung enough to convince you they must be doing something. For those who lose the dental lottery, almost everyone, there's always dentures. Early false teeth were often carved from ivory, animal bone, or even repurposed from the mouths of the recently departed. Yes, Waterloo teeth, prized trophies taken from the battlefield dead, were considered a status symbol. Nothing says winning at life like smiling with a stranger's incisors. Children's teeth were a lost cause. Sweets were on the rise, thanks to cheaper sugar imports, and childhood cavities were becoming a fact of life. Parents tried to limit the damage by teaching their children to swish water or chew on licorice root, but it was a losing battle. A Victorian family portrait is as much about the closed-mouth smile as it is about the elaborate hair and starched collars. By the time you've finished your morning ritual, your teeth may feel cleaner, but your tongue is numb, your gums are bleeding, and your breath smells like the inside of an abandoned brickworks. Still, you can hold your head high. In Victorian England, if you managed to keep most of your teeth into adulthood, you were either incredibly lucky, fabulously wealthy, or just very good at pretending not to be in pain. So go ahead, smile, just maybe not too wide. Victorian halitosis was a fact of life. Mints existed, but they were made of chalk, sugar, and sometimes morphine. The good news? You probably won't remember your own embarrassment for long. Let's set the scene. You've just finished your morning tooth, scraping with a mix of brick dust and wishful thinking, but somehow, your mouth still feels like it's hosting a Victorian-era cheese market. Breath freshening, for the 19th century Brit, was less about achieving minty freshness and more about desperately camouflaging the results of questionable dental hygiene, a diet heavy in onions and boiled cabbage, and the aftershocks of waking up in a smog-filled city. If you're well-to-do, your first line of defense is the breath lozenge, elegantly marketed as the cure for social horror. The most popular brands, 2 ingredients like chalk, sugar, and tragically optimistic doses of peppermint oil. You pop one in and instantly get that classic flavor combination, bakery accident with undertones of limestone. Some mints contained licorice root or cardamom for extra zip, but others went straight for a more medicinal approach. Enter morphine and cocaine, a pick-me-up so potent you quickly forget you even have a mouth, let alone what it smells like. These so-called pastilles came in pretty tins you could slip into your pocket or clutch, ready for deployment the moment you realized you were about to breathe on someone's newborn or the vicar's dog. Victorian etiquette books, which were basically anxiety manifestos, warned that offensive breath could doom you in polite society, marriage markets, and job interviews. This is not an exaggeration. One whiff of bad breath could have your prospects fleeing faster than a debutante at a frog jumping contest. But what if you're not a member of the well-minted elite? Cheaper remedies abound, all vying for a spot in your already overburdened pocket. Charcoal tablets, made from burnt toast or willow bark, promise to purify the stomach and sweeten the mouth. In reality, they mostly turn your tongue black and make you look like you've been gnawing on a fireplace. Cloves are another favourite. Just tuck one in your cheek and hope it overpowers the odour of last night's garlic stew. Bonus: it numbs your gums, so you'll be drooling attractively at afternoon tea. Home remedies veered from the creative to the outright desperate. Some people swished vinegar or lemon juice, which worked wonders for your breath but not for the lining of your mouth. Others chewed parsley, fennel seeds, or even, in a pinch, the corner of a clean handkerchief. If you were really unlucky, a family friend would recommend a cleansing tonic, often a syrup with enough alcohol to sterilize your breath, your esophagus, and possibly your long-term memory. The real tragedy of Victorian breath mints is that they were trying to mask a much bigger issue. Most people simply didn't have access to reliable dental care, or even the knowledge that bacteria was the culprit behind their oral woes. Instead, halitosis was seen as a personal failing or a sign of moral decay. Doctors might recommend a change in diet, more walking in bracing air, or, if you were feeling especially flush, a vacation to the seaside, where your breath could be safely dispersed by Atlantic winds. All this effort, of course, only worked for so long. After a long day spent eating, talking, and occasionally nodding off mid-conversation thanks to your morphine lozenge, your breath has reverted to its natural state, Victorian original. The social anxiety remains, but at least the lozenge has taken the edge off your panic, and possibly your pulse. So, as you tuck your tin of pastilles under your pillow and drift off to a dreamland scented faintly of licorice, chalk, and unearned optimism, rest easy knowing you did your best. In Victorian England, no one's breath was actually fresh. The only question was how well you could fake it. And if you ever find yourself in a parlour, cornered by the local gossip, just smile, offer a mint, and hope for the best. If nothing else, you'll both forget the whole encounter by morning. For just a few shillings, you could purchase arsenic tablets that claimed to clear your skin. Side effects included dizziness, confusion, and sudden collapse. If you're wondering why the beauty industry is still unregulated, it's because it started this way. Let's take a little trip to your local Victorian chemist, a wonderland of possibilities and poison. There, tucked between bottles of soothing syrup, guaranteed to silence any child for hours, possibly days, and nerve tonics, which are mostly alcohol and wishful thinking, you'll spot a tiny box promising miracles. Arsenic wafers for a brilliant, blemish-free complexion. The packaging is all florid script and optimistic promises. No ingredient list, of course, because the Victorians firmly believed that ignorance is bliss, especially when it comes to substances you're about to swallow. Your day begins with hope. You've tried lead powder, you've tried vinegar washes, you've even tried sleeping upright in a desperate attempt to let the toxins drain away, but your skin refuses to behave. So, with the delicate grace of a Victorian lady, or an especially reckless gentleman, you pop an arsenic wafer into your mouth and wash it down with a cup of weak tea. The taste? Somewhere between antique wallpaper and regret. But the adverts promise a peaches and cream complexion. Never mind that the cream part is a little too literal, and the peaches come with a side of nausea. Arsenic, in small doses, was believed to make the skin clearer, whiter, and more luminous. Luminous being code for slightly radioactive, and clearer meaning possibly invisible after you faint. The effects are subtle at first, a flush to the cheeks, a suspicious brightness to the eyes, and then, just as you're admiring your reflection, a wave of dizziness. Not to worry, that's just your body politely panicking. The secret of Victorian beauty was always balancing on a tightrope between fashionable pallor and outright self-harm. Women, and some men, measured their attractiveness not by the absence of blemishes, but by their willingness to risk death for a nice glow. A clear complexion wasn't just about health, it was about social status, discipline, and a truly spectacular disregard for long-term survival. The theory was that a little arsenic would improve digestion, clear the blood, and erase freckles, all while turning you into the kind of person who could light up a dark room, occasionally, quite literally. Of course, beauty comes with a price. Dizziness soon gives way to confusion. You can't quite remember whether you've taken your daily dose of quick collapse or just forgotten to eat breakfast again. Friends comment on your newfound radiance, but also on your tendency to lose your balance when turning corners or to nap unexpectedly during important social functions. Victorian etiquette books never quite covered how to revive a fainting beauty in the cheese aisle, but households quickly learned to keep smelling salts on hand. Doctors, for their part, alternated between alarm and opportunism. Some warned against arsenic use, citing symptoms like tremors of the hands, strange nervousness, and unladylike vomiting. Others cashed in, selling their own safer arsenic formulas, usually with even more mysterious ingredients. The medical consensus? As long as you didn't die, you were probably fine. For those who pushed their luck, the side effects grew less charming. Hair loss, skin rashes, and, in some tragic cases, a sudden and dramatic drop in attendance at local tea parties. But the market for arsenic wafers endured. After all, nothing says trend like a beauty product with an expiration date measured in heartbeats. So, as the evening draws near and your fourth wafer kicks in, you marvel at your luminous, pallid, dangerously delicate beauty. You may be unsteady on your feet, but at least your skin is blemish-free if you ignore the nervous twitch and the odd urge to lie down immediately. In Victorian England, a fresh face always came at a price. Fortunately, embarrassment wasn't one of the side effects. You were far too dizzy to care. Wigs were fashionable, practical, and home to an entire ecosystem of lice and mysterious powders. Scratching your head in public? Totally acceptable. Admitting why? Absolutely not. Let's picture your Victorian morning. You've finished your hair care routine, which mostly consisted of apologizing to your remaining follicles and praying for mercy, and now it's time for the crowning glory, a wig. Maybe it's made from horsehair, human hair, or something that used to belong to a sheep. No one really asks. What matters is that it's the latest style, and at least one social rung above natural baldness. But before you put it on, you have to powder it. Generously. This isn't your grandmother's baby powder. Victorian wig powder is a finely ground blend of flour, starch, talc, and sometimes even lead. The goal is a soft, elegant finish. Think cloud-like, dreamy, and ever so slightly carcinogenic. You apply with abandon, transforming your wig from sad leftover poodle to regal marshmallow. The powder seeps everywhere, into your eyes, your collar, and, if you sneeze at the wrong moment, across half the furniture. The effect is beautiful and vaguely edible, like wearing the world's most dangerous pastry on your head. And yet, no matter how you style it, a Victorian wig is not so much a hair accessory as it is a portable ecosystem. Lice adore wigs, fleas too. A particularly ambitious spider might even set up a short-term lease. As the day progresses, a familiar sensation returns. The itch. You know it's coming. Everyone does. That little tickle at your temple, the prickle behind your ear. It starts out gentle, a whisper of discomfort. But by midday, it's evolved into a full symphony of squirming misery. Etiquette books insisted that vigorous scratching was a mark of poor breeding. The genteel approach was a delicate, absent-minded pat, or perhaps a coy tilt of the head against a velvet curtain when no one was looking. But the reality? At every social gathering, there's a room full of people discreetly jabbing at their scalps with hat pins, knitting needles, or the nearest available feather. Adjusting one's coiffure is code for digging for gold. Every wig came with its own unique problems. Some were so tight that they left a perfect ring of indentation around your head, a red, itchy souvenir you'd carry until bedtime. Others were loose, threatening to shift or even topple with every enthusiastic handshake or ill-timed sneeze. There was a genuine fear of losing your wig at the opera, or worse, having it nibbled on by the family dog before a big party. Maintenance was a never-ending battle. Wigs were soaked, boiled, or doused in lavender water to refresh them, which mostly just gave the lice a fragrant environment in which to thrive. If you were lucky, your maid would comb through the wig with vinegar, chasing out some of the more adventurous insects. If you were less lucky, you just pop the whole thing on and hope the scratching noises didn't draw too much attention. Socially, everyone pretended it was all perfectly normal. Complaints were reserved for hushed, conspiratorial chats over tea, well out of earshot of anyone who might judge. "A little tickle today, Lady Bromley?" "Oh, merely a stray thought, Mrs. Phipps." Meanwhile, every head in the room is alive with activity. Woe betide anyone caught actually admitting the truth. "Yes, Margaret, I am infested, and I have no idea if this is my hair or last week's sheepdog." Sometimes the itch got the better of you. At that point, you'd risk everything for a few seconds of sweet, honest scratching. You'd dart behind a potted plant, scratch like your life depended on it, then re-emerge with a serene smile and a suspiciously lopsided wig. At day's end, as you peel off your powdered helmet and marvel at the landscape of red blotches and mysterious bites, you might even wonder if baldness would be such a social tragedy after all. For now, you brush out your wig, douse it with more powder, and set it on the stand for another day's battle. In the Victorian era, beauty was suffering, and when it came to wigs, suffering was most definitely shared. Long before microblading, Victorians drew their brows on with sticks dipped in burnt cork or mercury-based pomades. If your brows didn't slide off by noon, you were considered lucky. If you grew a second nose, less so. The Victorian brow was a thing of delicate, calculated beauty. Not too bushy, not too sparse, and, above all, arched just so, an invitation to mystery or possibly confusion. But for many Victorians, achieving the look required a bit of creativity, a willingness to experiment with chemistry, and a deep, unspoken acceptance that you'd be flirting with heavy metals before breakfast. Let's start with the basics. Your natural brows are thin and patchy, victims of last week's depilatory cream or this week's arsenic face wash. No matter. The solution sits waiting on your dressing table. A sliver of burnt cork, or, if you're feeling fancy, a lead pencil or a dab of brow pomade. The directions are simple. Warm the cork over a candle, smear the blackened end across your brow bone, and hope you don't catch a stray spark and ignite your fringe. The effect is decidedly bold. Your eyebrows now register on distant ships as navigational beacons. For the more ambitious, or those who believe in the power of science, there's the Mercury pomade. This small, mysterious jar contains a shiny ointment, mercurial in every sense. Advertised as smudge-resistant and naturally enhancing, it glides on with the ease of a dream and the toxicity of a nightmare. A few strokes, and your brows appear fuller, glossier, and just a touch metallic. Side effects may include tingling, numbness, and the dawning suspicion that you're losing your sense of smell. Application is an event. Ladies lean in, peering into cloudy mirrors, holding their breath for that crucial moment when both brows might actually match. Victorians were nothing if not optimistic, so the fact that one brow is halfway to the hairline while the other hovers above your nose is a sign you are artistic. The real challenge comes later. Humidity, nervous sweating, and the ever-present risk that your newly sculpted brows might slip right down your face in the middle of a tense luncheon. "Excuse me, Lady Clara, I believe your eyebrow has landed in my consommé." There's an etiquette to brow maintenance. Ladies' magazines recommend a midday touch-up in the powder room. Some carried tiny sticks of soot or portable pomade in delicate compacts, ready for emergencies, much like the modern smartphone, except it's full of chemicals and regret. If you've chosen the Mercury formula, You may notice your brows becoming sparser week by week, a small price to pay for the fleeting triumph of a perfect arch. As for men, actors, and gentlemen with expressive faces often followed the same route, especially when taking to the stage. There's nothing quite like the drama of a villain's eyebrows drawn on at rakish angles, threatening to leap clean off his face before the final act. If a little Mercury boosted the performance, or eliminated the competition by poisoning half the cast, well, such was the price of art. Not all stories ended in disaster. Occasionally, a Victorian beauty would master the delicate art of brow symmetry, only to realize that her brows had outlasted her dinner guests, her patience, and possibly her grip on reality. The next morning, she would awaken to faint smudges on her pillow and the faint aroma of scorched cork and ambition. But if you overindulged in the Mercury pomade, there was always the chance your skin would react in unpredictable ways. Some unlucky souls developed little sores, while others found themselves growing hair in places that weren't quite on the brow line. Victorian doctors were stumped, offering advice ranging from apply more cold cream to consider a hat with a wider brim. In the end, a perfect Victorian eyebrow was an act of hope and hazardous artistry. Whether painted with cork, smudged with soot, or buffed to a poisonous shine, those brows told the world you were both fashionable and fearless, even if, by the end of the night, you looked more like a tragic clown than a queen of society. Red lips required carmine dye, animal fat, and a touch of lead for that perfect pout. If your lipstick made your mouth numb, you were doing it right. If it made your tongue blue, maybe rethink your life choices. Let's start your day in the Victorian boudoir, where the ritual of applying lip colour was as much a test of courage as it was a statement of beauty. Unlike today, where a swipe of lipstick is a minor act of self-care, Victorian lip colour was a full-blown commitment to questionable chemistry and the art of denial. You gaze at your reflection in a slightly warped mirror, pursing lips that are still recovering from last night's attempt at pearl-infused toothpaste. But fashion waits for no one. It's time to create that coveted Cupid's bow, no matter the cost or the odd tingling sensation. The basic recipe for Victorian lip rouge? Start with carmine, an intense crimson dye made by grinding up cochineal beetles, imported at great expense, and a little bit of insect-based bravery. Mix it with animal fat, lard if you're budget-conscious, or tallow if you want that extra glossy shine. Finally, for that subtle metallic sheen, add a dab of lead, because nothing says high society like mildly toxic heavy metals in your smile. Application is a careful ritual. You scoop a tiny bit of the waxy paste onto your finger, dabbing it along the curve of your lips. It goes on thick, with a distinct aroma, somewhere between rendered bacon and the art classroom at a school for future forgers. In the best case, your lips glow with a vibrant theatrical red. In the worst case, the colour spreads unevenly, highlighting every crack and dryness, and you begin to wonder if Victorian England invented chapped lips just to sell more animal fat. The tingling starts almost immediately, a gentle numbness that suggests either the lead is working or your lips are staging a protest. If you accidentally lick your lips, you're treated to a flavour profile that includes beeswax, beef, and the faintest note of existential regret. For some, the numbness is reassuring, a sign of true luxury. For others, the gradual shift to bluish lips is less comforting, especially if it matches the new colour of your tongue. Social conventions make matters more complicated. On one hand, natural beauty is prized. Bright red lips are considered a bit scandalous, associated with actresses, courtesans, or women of questionable virtue. On the other hand, a pale mouth makes you look half dead, which is never a strong first impression at the season's debutante ball. The solution? Subtlety. The most stylish women apply just enough rouge to create a healthy bloom, carefully dabbing it off with a lace handkerchief to avoid the dreaded look of trying too hard. Men, of course, are expected to remain entirely unadorned, though theatre actors, desperate poets, and the occasional dandy may risk a discreet application before a night out. The hazards are real, but so is the pressure. Every tea party, every waltz, every accidental cough in the direction of a suitor is a chance for your lip colour to be tested. Will it hold up through an awkward conversation and a plate of tepid cucumber sandwiches? Or will it slowly migrate off your face, onto your teeth, and then, inexplicably, onto the rim of someone else's glass? There's a particular social mortification in realizing your lipstick has transferred to the family dog, who now looks ready to take up a career in Victorian theatre. And of course, at the end of the night, removal is its own adventure. You dab at your lips with oil, then rub with a rough cloth, only to discover the dye has managed to sink several layers deep. You might wake up the next morning with a faint, persistent red stain. A reminder that beauty, in this era, was always a little bit permanent, and almost always hazardous. So, as you drift off to sleep, lips tingling and taste buds confused, you can rest assured that, for one shining evening, you are the living embodiment of Victorian glamour. And if your pillowcase now bears the ghost of your perfect pout, it's just further proof that, in the quest for beauty, some risks are simply par for the course. Nothing says beauty like organ displacement. Victorian corsets, cinched waists, and rearranged internal organs like a particularly aggressive Tetris game. Breathing is optional, fainting is mandatory. The day begins, and so does the struggle. Before breakfast, before brushing your teeth, before even considering your place in society, you must confront the fabric and whalebone beast lying in wait on your bed, the corset. Its laces dangle ominously. Its boning feels rigid and eternal, and it promises, if you survive the next 10 minutes, to transform you into a living hourglass. That is, an hourglass with the approximate lung capacity of a hamster and a spine that makes an alarming number of new noises. The first step is to shimmy into your chemise, a thin cotton slip that acts as a modest buffer between your sensitive Victorian skin and the structural ambitions of your corset. If you're lucky, a housemaid arrives to assist with the process. If not, it's up to you. A series of awkward contortions, some mild cursing, and a desperate hope that you remembered to unlace the back last night. Now, the tightening. Your maid, friend, or tragically optimistic mother begins to pull, gradually drawing the laces tighter and tighter until your waist is less natural shape and more aspirational circumference. With every tug, you feel your ribs folding inward, your stomach flattening, and your breakfast creeping back up in protest. There's a reason every Victorian fainting couch looks so well loved. As the corset closes, you become aware of new sensations, the faintest tingle in your toes, the delightful ringing in your ears, and a rising sense of euphoria that can only mean you're getting just enough oxygen to remain conscious. Your organs are having heated debates about whose turn it is to occupy the prime real estate around your midsection. Your liver and spleen are considering a timeshare. Your lungs, meanwhile, have filed a formal complaint. At last, you're cinched. You peer into the mirror and see a wasp-waisted vision, an architectural marvel and the envy of all. The fashionable silhouette is achieved. And now, the true test. Mobility. Can you sit? Sometimes. Bend over? Only if you're prepared to pass out in a dramatic heap. Can you eat more than a teaspoon of porridge at breakfast? Absolutely not. Every meal is an exercise in caution, lest a second helping result in a wardrobe malfunction and an impromptu visit from the family physician. Social expectations do not care about your comfort. At every event, your posture must be perfect, your breathing shallow and graceful, and your face serene, no matter how much you're sweating or how many toes have gone numb. Should you faint, which, let's be honest, is inevitable, you are immediately surrounded by admirers who marvel at your delicacy and hand you a fan, some smelling salts, and perhaps a congratulatory cup of weak tea. Rumours swirl about the dangers of tight lacing, broken ribs, deformed spines, the occasional organ migration. Doctors wring their hands, poets sigh about tragic beauty, and fashion magazines offer reassuring advice, like never sleep in your corset unless you desire a truly permanent figure. Still, the trend continues after all. To be fashionable is to suffer, and to suffer stylishly is its own reward. When at last you escape your corset at the end of the day, you're left with red lines, mysterious bruises, and a sense of liberation bordering on euphoria. Your organs rush back to their original positions like guests leaving a disappointing party. You breathe deeply for the first time in hours, stretch your arms, and briefly consider burning the corset, only to remember you'll need it again tomorrow. In Victorian England, a tiny waist was proof of discipline, beauty, and social capital. But beneath the laces, every heartbeat whispered the same thing. Please, just one more inch of breathing room. And thus, the day ends as it began, shaped, cinched, and ever so slightly suffocated by the relentless pursuit of the perfect silhouette. Flat behind? Not in this era. Bustles stuffed with horsehair and steel transformed figures into fashionable hourglasses at the cost of sitting, standing, or existing comfortably. Let's begin with the all-consuming Victorian quest for the ideal silhouette. You've already cinched your waist within an inch of its life, and now you're faced with another architectural challenge: constructing a backside that could stop traffic on Regent Street. In the 1870s and 1880s, bustle mania swept England, and the result was a national obsession with rear-end real estate. A natural figure? Unthinkable. The only acceptable shape was one that made it look like you might be smuggling a picnic basket under your skirt. Enter the bustle. At first glance, it's just a small padded cushion, a little extra oomph tied discreetly at the waist. But fashions escalate quickly. By the height of bustle mania, the average Victorian lady was strapping on a contraption worthy of the Royal Engineers, a frame of steel hoops, padded with horsehair, crinoline, straw, or whatever the local upholsterer had lying around. The goal: to create a dramatic shelf jutting out from your lower back, sturdy enough to support a tea service or perhaps a small, confused dog. Putting on a bustle was both a feat of engineering and an act of faith. First, you'd tie or button the frame around your waist, praying it wouldn't list to starboard or creak ominously at inopportune moments. Next came layer after layer of heavy petticoats, followed by a skirt designed to drape, swoop, and accentuate every inch of glorious padding. The effect? You now look like you're prepared to take flight backwards, or survive a minor carriage collision. The sacrifices are immediate. Sitting gracefully becomes an exercise in geometry. You perch on the very edge of a chair, careful not to crush your structure, or, worse, launch it across the room. Some chairs are designed with gaps or cutouts just for bustles, an unspoken admission that, yes, furniture now has to accommodate the demands of fashion. Getting into a carriage or pew requires spatial awareness that would humble a champion chess player. The famous Victorian swoon isn't just about tight corsets, it's also a desperate attempt to rest your lower spine. Walking with a bustle is an adventure of its own. Each step is accompanied by a faint squeak, rattle, or the gentle sensation that you're dragging a small, determined goat. Children and dogs find your silhouette irresistible, trailing after you in parades of curiosity. And heaven help you if a mischievous friend decides to hide a love note, a crumpet, or, once, a live ferret among the layers of tulle and wire. The bustle is not a solo act either. Fashionable society means keeping up with the latest shape, which changes every few years from modest bump to full architectural marvel and back again. Ladies' magazines debate the merits of spring steel versus whalebone, and there are heated arguments about the most flattering lift. Competing in the bustle arms race is exhausting, not to mention expensive. No wonder Victorian households went through so much tea and so many painkillers. At the end of a long day, peeling off your bustle is pure relief. The structure creaks, groans, and finally collapses, leaving you free to move like a normal human again. Your lower back sings with gratitude. You may find the occasional lost hairpin, dropped coin, or the remains of that breakfast scone you never had time to finish. Such are the hazards of Victorian rear-end enhancement. So tonight, as you collapse onto your fainting couch, no bustle required, remember this. In the Victorian age, fashion wasn't just about beauty. It was about commitment, creativity, and the willingness to strap an entire hardware store to your behind if that's what it took to be on trend. The Victorian home chemist loved mixing kitchen ingredients with industrial chemicals. Why not try a face mask of buttermilk, quicklime, and, just for fun, a dash of ammonia? It's all natural, if your definition of natural is immediately regrettable. Welcome to the kitchen, where beauty dreams go to die. If you couldn't afford the latest Parisian arsenic wafer or imported carmine, you did what any enterprising Victorian would do. You made it yourself, using whatever was handy, and sometimes things that absolutely shouldn't be. Magazines and advice columns were full of foolproof beauty concoctions, which were really just cautionary tales waiting to happen. The best part? Everything was guaranteed safe and gentle, as long as you ignored the burning sensation, fainting spells, and the suspicious loss of eyebrows. Let's start with a humble face mask. Victorians loved the idea of purifying the complexion. Recipes varied, but the principle was always the same. Take something sour, buttermilk, lemon juice, vinegar, something caustic, quicklime, baking soda, or the ever-popular borax, and mix until it starts to fizz menacingly. Apply generously, lean back, and pretend the stinging is a sign of progress, not impending doom. Friends may marvel at your radiance. You know the truth. The redness isn't a glow, it's just first-degree chemical warfare. And then there were the hair tonics. Why waste money on bear grease when you could make a mask of egg yolks, olive oil, and a dram of turpentine, according to the popular advice columns? Just whip it up and slather it on. The smell is unforgettable, as is the alarming possibility of spontaneous combustion if you linger too close to the hearth. Some guides recommended adding a bit of brandy for shine, though it's unclear if that was meant for the hair or for drinking away the trauma after you realized your eyebrows were dissolving. Looking for a freckle remedy? Don't worry, there's a home recipe for that too. One popular option combined cucumber juice, ammonia, and finely ground chalk. Dab it on your cheeks and wait for the fresh tingle. That's Victorian for your skin is surrendering. In a pinch, you could try a paste of parsley and quicksilver, as long as you didn't mind glowing in the dark or explaining to your friends why your freckles had migrated south for the season. Victorian deodorant was another adventure. Modern antiperspirants didn't exist, so you improvised. Vinegar washes, alum powder, or a brisk rub-down with a lemon wedge. The prevailing wisdom was that a faint, natural musk was perfectly acceptable, as long as it was masked by a thick cloud of rosewater or, failing that, gin. The important thing was never to let anyone know you were sweating, even as your homemade concoction was melting through your chemise and taking the dye with it. And for the ultimate DIY disaster, the homemade depilatory, Victorians were deeply concerned about unsightly hair, so they turned to kitchen chemistry. A paste of lime, arsenic, and starch promised silky skin and only occasional chemical burns. If you were especially unfortunate, the paste would work by removing everything, including dignity, a thin layer of skin, and any trust you ever had in home remedies. Through it all, every Victorian kept up appearances. To admit a homemade remedy had backfired was to admit you couldn't afford the good stuff from the chemist, or that you'd taken advice from that one cousin who once set fire to her own eyelashes. Instead, you soldiered on, reapplying lemon, vinegar, and hope, convinced that next time you'd achieve that youthful bloom. So as you sit by the window, fanning your freshly tingling cheeks, remember, history's greatest beauty disasters were often mixed with love, hope, and the vague scent of ammonia. If nothing else, you can always say you tried, and maybe, just maybe, keep the kitchen matches far from your new all-natural hair mask. Imagine sinking into a bath filled with questionable water, sulfur, and the leftover residue of everyone who bathed before you. Spas promised rejuvenation, but mostly delivered fungal souvenirs and stories you'll never repeat. The Victorian spa experience was, in theory, a luxury, a day devoted to health, relaxation, and the pursuit of beauty. In practice, it was more of a communal science experiment, with yourself as the control group and your immune system as the primary test subject. You start the day by packing your bag, a fresh chemise, a slightly moldy towel, and perhaps a small bottle of carbolic acid, just in case. Your hopes are high, your standards are flexible, and your nose is already bracing itself for impact. Arriving at the bathhouse, you're greeted by the unmistakable aroma of ancient tile, damp wood, and eau de mystery. There's a constant background chorus of drips, sloshes, and the occasional shriek as someone discovers a floating object that definitely isn't part of the spa's mineral treatment package. Still, you're here for rejuvenation, so you soldier on, reassured by the cheerful advertisements promising to renew the blood and banish unsightly imperfections. Never mind that the only thing being banished is your sense of dignity. Step 1. Disrobe in a communal changing area, where privacy is as rare as soap. You wrap yourself in a borrowed robe, noticing with trepidation that it's suspiciously damp, and shuffle toward your assigned bath. The tub is, charitably, well used. You try not to think too hard about who was here before you, or whether the greyish ring around the rim is included in the price. The water itself is a tepid blend of sulphur, iron, and optimism, with floating petals if you're lucky, and floating toenails if you're not. As you ease in, your pores begin to tingle, possibly from the healing minerals, possibly from the microbial stew. The sensation is brisk, bracing, and not entirely pleasant. Victorian doctors swore by the curative properties of mineral water, claiming it could treat everything from rheumatism to heartbreak. Whether this is actually true remains questionable, but the placebo effect is strong, especially when you're determined to get your money's worth out of a tub that smells faintly of rotten eggs and public transport. Bathhouses were social hubs, so any attempt at quiet reflection is soon shattered by conversation. Next to you, two matrons compare the effectiveness of arsenic face powder versus sulphur soap, while a child, released from maternal control, performs cannonballs with the abandon of someone who hasn't yet learned about bacteria. In the far corner, an elderly gentleman insists that his daily soak has reversed his baldness, though the evidence remains entirely theoretical. After your soak, you're encouraged to try additional treatments: steam baths, cold plunges, and the infamous Russian bath, which involves being beaten gently but persistently with birch branches, allegedly to improve circulation. You emerge from this experience, pink, stinging, and convinced you've just participated in a team-building exercise for masochists. If you're lucky, you can avoid the therapeutic leeches, a treatment that's somehow both medieval and modern, and always more expensive than you'd expect. To finish, there's the shared lounge, where patrons recline in chairs, upholstered with mysterious stains, and sip tepid mineral water from communal glasses. You listen politely as the staff extol the virtues of a twice-weekly detox regimen, and mentally calculate how many layers of skin you'll need to shed to feel truly clean again. Some guests swear they've been cured of their ailments. Others simply leave with new stories, slightly pinker skin, and an urgent desire to boil everything they own. At the end of your Victorian spa day, you're relaxed, rejuvenated, and possibly infected with something you can't pronounce. But you've earned your badge of honor. The knowledge that, in the name of beauty and health, you braved the baths and lived to tell the tale, even if you'll never quite look at bath water the same way again. Bedtime is for slathering your face in cold cream, made from animal fat, almond oil, and enough wax to seal a crypt. Pleasant dreams, assuming you don't stick to the pillow. The Victorian nighttime beauty ritual was less about comfort and more about commitment. By day, you've powdered, painted, and plucked yourself into high society's idea of elegance. By night, you prepare to undo, or at least disguise, the slow-motion disaster that's unfolding on your skin. As the lamplight flickers, you eye your bedside table, a collection of mysterious jars and pots that promise rejuvenation and sometimes deliver well. Something. Step 1. Cold cream. This isn't the silky, floral-scented stuff you find today. Victorian cold cream was a greasy, waxy substance that had the consistency of melted candle and the scent of an unwashed dairy. Its main ingredients are animal fat, goose, pig, or whatever could be rendered down, and almond oil, which sounds appealing until you realize the almond is mostly there to mask the smell of lard. The final touch is beeswax, added in such generous quantities that the cream hardens if you leave it by an open window. Scooping it out requires a strong wrist and the reckless optimism of someone about to test the fire alarm. You take a dollop and begin the sacred nightly process, dabbing, spreading, and eventually massaging the substance into your face, neck, and, if you're ambitious, your elbows. The feeling is memorable. Instead of moisturizing, it's more like basting yourself for a slow roast. You're left shiny, slippery, and ready for bed, or a trip down a particularly steep staircase, as the cream offers absolutely no traction. Next comes the night serum, which is usually just a fancy name for scented water, rose oil, or, if you've recently inherited a family fortune, elderflower extract. Advice columns promise it will prevent wrinkles and restore youthful glow. What it actually does is mingle with the cold cream, creating an unholy alliance that will stain your pillowcase and terrify any household pets. And yet, no beauty sleep is complete without a bit of self-doubt. You lie down, head propped up at an awkward angle to avoid smearing the entire left side of your face into the pillow. There is a brief, slippery battle with the bedding. If you move too quickly, your cheek slides off the pillowcase, leaving a greasy trail. If you're unlucky, you wake up with your face stuck to the linens, sporting a lovely crosshatch pattern that will take all morning to fade. Meanwhile, the scent of almond-laced lard wafts gently around your bedroom, occasionally joined by hints of rose, lavender, or, on really bad nights, sheep. Of course, this is just the beginning. For those with problem skin, Victorian night creams might include added tonics, like mercury, lead, or a splash of ammonia, guaranteed to dry up blemishes. The results? Sometimes miraculous, usually horrifying. You'll either wake up radiant or with a rash that needs its own calling card. Don't even ask about the homemade recipes. If your cousin's cold cream contains quicklime or her neighbour's special recipe calls for mashed potatoes, just nod politely and decline. The true challenge, though, is getting any actual sleep. Victorian beds are already an ordeal. Lumpy mattresses, cold drafts, and the ever-present threat of bedbugs. Now you've added the anxiety of preserving your elaborate cold cream application. Each toss and turn is a gamble. Will you stay beautifully hydrated, or will you end up looking like a well-basted ham by dawn? By sunrise, your face is either dewy or just oily, and your pillowcase bears silent witness to the night's greasy campaign. You rise, scrub off the residue with lye soap, and prepare to start the daily routine of powders, rouges, and regrets once more. So tonight, as you slather on your cold cream and slide into bed, remember, true Victorian beauty never sleeps. It just waits for the next application. Hair removal, Victorian style, lime, arsenic, or pumice stone. Just apply liberally and wait for the tingling, burning sensation. Smooth skin or lifelong scarring, why not both? Welcome to the clandestine underbelly of Victorian beauty, where the quest for smooth skin was waged with the most alarming tools the 19th century had to offer. Today's spa menu may offer laser treatments and sugar waxing, but in Victorian England, your options were more medieval. If you were plagued by superfluous hair, Victorian for normal body hair that society has arbitrarily decided must go, you'd consult a battered beauty manual, a gossipy neighbour, or that one cousin who always smelled faintly of lie and defeat. Let's start with the classics. Depilatory creams, proudly homemade and dangerously undertested. The main ingredient was lime. No, not the zesty citrus, but caustic quicklime, which, when mixed with water, forms a paste capable of dissolving both hair and hope. Victorian advice columns promised that if you smeared this chalky goop across your upper lip or arms, gentle friction would whisk the hair away. In reality, what it mostly whisked away was your top layer of skin and any trust you ever had in home remedies. For those feeling especially daring or simply unlucky, arsenic made an appearance in many advanced depilatories, because if arsenic could make your complexion luminous, why not your legs? A thin paste of arsenic and starch, applied in a thick layer and left to do its work, left you with temporarily hairless, permanently worried skin. Side effects included tingling, burning, and a sudden desire to write your will. But hey, beauty is pain. And possibly slow, cumulative poisoning. If you weren't keen on chemicals, there was always the pumice stone, nature's way of turning your bathroom into a construction site. You'd scrub the offending hair and half your epidermis away with a block of volcanic rock, enduring the sound of gentle exfoliation and the lingering suspicion that you were being sandpapered for a reason. Women bragged about their smooth arms, but the real miracle was that they had any arms left at all. There were also devices, sold through catalogues and often requiring the optimism of a lottery winner. Spring-tensioned tweezers promised to pluck hair at the root, while mechanical rollers loosened follicles. Translation: pinched you, repeatedly, until you gave up. Some enterprising Victorians even tried versions of waxing, heated mixtures of honey and resin, slapped on and then yanked off with a strip of cloth and a scream muffled by a lace handkerchief. If you managed not to faint, congratulations, you're now halfway to a beauty column testimonial. The results, as you might imagine, were mixed. On a good day, you'd achieve smooth skin, a sense of triumph, and only minor scarring. On a bad day, you'd spend the evening hiding red, raw patches under gloves, shawls, or, in the case of a truly disastrous experiment, a large decorative hat. Socially, hair removal was shrouded in secrecy. No one admitted to the pain, the burns, or the strange smell wafting from the powder room. "She's unwell," was the usual explanation, as you quietly fanned your scalded upper lip behind a curtain. The beauty manuals, of course, were full of encouragement. For the truly persistent lady, a few moments of discomfort yield a lifetime of admiration, or at least a lifetime of never wearing short sleeves again. The dream was always smooth, alabaster skin, untouched by nature, enhanced by science, and bravely endured for the benefit of future dinner parties. As night falls and you apply your final soothing balm, rosewater and wishful thinking, you reflect on the high price of hairlessness. Smooth skin is yours, for now, along with a healthy fear of anything that bubbles, tingles, or fizzes unexpectedly. In the world of Victorian beauty, no pain, no gain wasn't just a motto. It was a nightly reality, one scalded elbow at a time. Freckles were a fate worse than poverty. Enter lemon juice, vinegar, and special erasing creams made of mercury. Now featuring permanent skin sensitivity. Let's set the scene. It's a blindingly bright Victorian morning, and you unfortunately were born with the kind of skin that doesn't understand the concept of subtlety. After a single sunny afternoon in the garden, your nose and cheeks bloom with cheerful little freckles, each one a tiny, embarrassing reminder that you've spent time outdoors. In an age when pale, flawless skin is the ultimate badge of beauty and status, your new constellation is considered almost scandalous. You might as well have shown up to the Queen's tea party with cabbage in your hair. Enter the never-ending quest for complexion correction. Victorian magazines and beauty advisors waste no time in offering helpful, if deeply unhinged, remedies. The first recommendation is always lemon juice. Natural, refreshing, and gently bleaching, they promise. You dutifully dab your face with the juice of an entire lemon, hissing as it finds every tiny scratch and open pore. The scent is bright, the sensation is fierce, and the results are mostly sticky, When that fails, you're told to try vinegar. It's invigorating and clarifying, but mostly it just makes you smell like an underdressed salad. Not satisfied? The true connoisseur of Victorian skincare upgrades to freckle-erasing creams. These mysterious mixtures are sold in delicate jars, usually labelled with florid, confidence-inspiring names like Dr. Beaton's Complexion Balm or Madame Fleur's Elixir of Clarity. The fine print, if it existed, would reveal a host of ingredients best left in the apothecary's darkest cupboard. Mercury was the most popular, prized for its brightening properties and total disregard for human safety. Apply a thin layer to your freckles, wait for the cool tingle to turn into a suspicious burn, and rest assured that you are now well on your way to a glowing, freckle-free, and possibly feverish appearance. Of course, the side effects are immediate and memorable. That tingling is your skin's way of sending up the Victorian equivalent of a flare gun. Redness, peeling, and what one magazine optimistically called permanent delicacy follow closely behind. Soon you develop a sensitivity to sunlight, so profound you might as well become a recluse. Outdoor events are now a high-stakes game of chase the shade, and parasols become less of an accessory and more of a personal safety device. Socially, freckles are whispered about in the same tones reserved for minor scandals and unconfirmed sightings of Prince Albert. "She's got a lovely face, if only it weren't for those dreadful spots," says your aunt, shaking her head and clutching her own jar of mercury cream with white-knuckled determination. Meanwhile, you are busily concocting your own home remedies. Mashed strawberries, sour milk, or a curious paste made from parsley and a prayer. Nothing seems to work. Some friends recommend covering up with even more powder, lead-based, naturally, which does a fine job of masking your freckles while possibly adding a few new health concerns to your morning routine. At public gatherings, you practice the art of strategic sitting, always turning your good side to the light and never ever letting anyone get a close look at your cheeks. In family portraits, you position yourself in the shadow of the nearest relative. If you're very lucky, an artist will airbrush your freckles out of existence with a generous application of paint and imagination. In the end, the battle against freckles is both never-ending and deeply futile. By the time you reach the end of your Victorian beauty routine, you're left with skin that's paler, more fragile, and oddly patchy, but perhaps, by the standards of the day, acceptably blank. And if you're still seeing spots, you can always tell yourself it's just the mercury talking. So tonight, as you set down your lemon, cork your vinegar, and slide your mercury cream under the bed, you might consider a radical thought. Perhaps freckles aren't so bad after all. But don't say it too loudly. Victorian society isn't quite ready for that kind of revolution. Gentlemen weren't immune. Hair oils contained lead, mustache waxes had turpentine, and aftershave was basically flammable. Victorian masculinity was measured in how many substances you could survive before breakfast. Victorian England was not a kind era to anyone with a face, but for men, the daily grooming ritual was an especially treacherous gauntlet, a test of endurance, chemical fortitude, and a complete disregard for fire safety regulations. The well-groomed Victorian gentleman aspired to a glistening head of hair, a moustache that could stand up to a stiff breeze, and sideburns you could use as emergency rope. Achieving this, however, required a morning routine that would make a modern hazardous materials team break out in a cold sweat. The day began with hair. Forget simple shampoo. The refined man slathered his scalp with hair oils, blends of castor oil, bear grease, and, for the ambitious, a hearty dash of lead acetate. These tonics promised to darken the hair, restore its shine, and ward off premature baldness. In practice, they mostly created a film so slick that you could style your hair into gravity-defying shapes or slip through a crowded omnibus unscathed. The lead was meant to keep the grey at bay, but it often just dyed the scalp and left behind an ever-growing collection of odd rashes and persistent headaches. Next up, the moustache. Victorian moustache wax was not for the faint of heart. The base ingredient was typically beeswax or lard. sticky, heavy, and perfect for sculpting facial hair into elaborate shapes. But that wasn't enough for the true dandy. For extra hold, manufacturers added a touch of turpentine, which guaranteed your mustache would stay upright, even if you were caught in a rainstorm or a duel. The downside? A mustache with the texture of a ship's rope and a tendency to burst into flame if you lingered too long near a gas lamp. On the plus side, you'd never have to worry about someone borrowing your grooming kit. Then came the daily shave, a delicate dance with straight razors honed to a gleam and an array of shaving soaps that ranged from luxurious to life-threatening. After the shave, a generous splash of aftershave, often little more than watered-down gin or cologne mixed with a hint of menthol and a promise, left your skin tingling, your eyes watering, and your cheeks audibly sizzling. The stinging was invigorating, a manly sign you were ready to face the day, or at least awake enough to stagger to breakfast. But Victorian masculinity wasn't just about surviving the basics. It was about thriving amid adversity. If you really wanted to be on trend, you might use a facial invigorator, a spring-loaded metal mask designed to stimulate circulation by squeezing your face with the enthusiasm of a Victorian aunt. Or perhaps a bit of complexion water, advertised to clear spots and brighten the skin but known to include everything from mercury to a mystery blend of industrial chemicals. The logic was clear. If your skin could withstand the onslaught, you were obviously made of stern stuff. For men suffering from weakness, nervous exhaustion, or just a hangover, the patent medicine aisle offered a smorgasbord of solutions. Nerve tonics, bitters, and restorative elixirs boasted secret formulas and active ingredients that included cocaine, opium, or a hearty pour of industrial alcohol. Side effects ranged from cheerful outlook to spontaneous poetry recital, and sometimes brief coma. Of course, none of this could be admitted. True masculine suffering was done in silence. The agony of burning aftershave or smouldering mustache borne with stoic pride. At the club, you'd compare notes on new hair oils, not mentioning the headache, rash, or small explosion from that morning. So as you finish your regimen, hair gleaming, mustache defying gravity, and face smelling faintly of cleaning fluid, take pride. In Victorian England, surviving your own grooming routine was the first victory of the day, and sometimes the last. Outbreaks of smallpox and syphilis left scars, literally. Heavy makeup doubled as camouflage, but at the cost of clogging every pore and possibly poisoning the user. On the plus side, your secrets die with you. Let's set the scene. You wake up in Victorian England, where surviving childhood illnesses was a minor miracle, but surviving them beautifully was nearly impossible. If you lived through smallpox, congratulations, you've now earned a lifetime of pitted scars, all arranged like a tragic roadmap across your cheeks and forehead. Syphilis, that polite illness nobody talked about, left its own grim marks. The stakes were high. Flawless skin was the gold standard of beauty and respectability, but the odds were never in your favor. Enter the arsenal of camouflage. Your dressing table resembles a painter's studio, crowded with pots, jars, and brushes for every possible surface. Victorian makeup wasn't about subtle enhancement, it was about full-scale cover-up. Foundation, such as Venetian ceruse, was ladled on by the handful, forming a ghostly white mask that promised to smooth imperfections while quietly launching a chemical assault on your already beleaguered skin. For those with scars, thick powder was applied in hopeful layers until any trace of history vanished beneath the leaden sheen. The motto: if people are too distracted by your radiant pallor to see the craters underneath, you've won. Of course, all this coverage came at a price. Your pores, gamely struggling to breathe under their new mineral blanket, soon rebelled. The results were predictable: more blemishes, more powder, and, eventually, a complexion that could double as a cautionary tale for future dermatologists. But what choice did you have? Social circles were merciless. The very hint of a pockmark could doom a marriage prospect, invite gossip, or even mark you as morally questionable. all for the crime of getting sick at the wrong time. If your scars were particularly deep, you turned to specialized concealers. Recipes included a blend of beeswax, lard, and a dash of ochre for color. Some creative souls experimented with mixtures of egg white and chalk, which produced a film so stiff that you could hardly smile, possibly a blessing, since showing too much expression risked cracking your entire facade. For a truly committed cover-up, you might use a thin slice of velvet or silk, carefully glued to the skin as a beauty patch. These patches, heart-shaped or star-shaped, became both fashion statements and whispered signals of secret ailments. Who knew your romantic flair was also your medical history? Men were not exempt from this cosmetic charade. Gentlemen with pox scars took to gentleman's powder or grew beards wide enough to conceal most of their jawline. Theatre actors, already experts in transformation, taught entire generations the subtle art of stage makeup, a skill that occasionally came in handy at dinner parties and high-stakes card games. But perhaps the greatest secret was not what you put on your face, but what you couldn't wash away. Lead-based products brought their own hazards: headaches, chronic fatigue, and, in severe cases, hallucinations. The only thing more dangerous than being recognized as a survivor of illness was being recognized as someone who'd tried to cover it up. It was a careful, delicate dance. Mask the marks enough to blend in, but not so thickly that your mask began to slide off, revealing all. In the end, your beauty routine is both camouflage and confession. Every day, you stare into the mirror, wondering if today is the day the mask fails, if someone will see through to the truth you've hidden under all that powder, paint, and hope. Still, you soldier on. The world may never know what lies beneath, and if they do, well, your secrets are safe, sealed under layers of lead and beeswax, as enduring as the scars they conceal. And in Victorian England, sometimes that's as close to victory as you'll ever get. Door-to-door salesmen hawked miracle lotions and cure-alls. Many doubled as furniture polish or rat poison. If your beauty cream peeled the paint off your vanity, it was probably working. The Victorian age was a golden era for the enterprising con artist, especially those with a suitcase full of bubbling bottles, flowery promises, and an almost supernatural ability to keep a straight face while selling snake oil as the secret to eternal youth. The door-to-door patent medicine huckster became a familiar figure, lurking at the end of every street and knocking on every respectable door. His pitch was irresistible, a special formula to erase every freckle, cure every rash, and, if you read the fine print, possibly clean your silverware as well. You answer the door, and are greeted by a man in a slightly shiny hat and a coat with too many pockets. He introduces himself as Professor Everwell, purveyor of Dr. Fairchild's Universal Beautifying Balm or Madame Mirabelle's Elixir of Enchantment. The labels are ornate, the glass bottles are heavy, and the liquid inside is always a suspicious shade of brownish yellow. The demonstration is pure theatre, a dab of cream applied to the back of your hand, followed by a speech about restoring youthful bloom and banishing the woes of modern living. Never mind that the same bottle will strip varnish off the sideboard or drive cockroaches from the pantry. The secret ingredients? Patent medicines were proprietary blends, which is Victorian for nobody has a clue. Alcohol, opium, and sugar were popular foundations, topped off with generous helpings of turpentine, ammonia, or carbolic acid. One particularly famous face lotion promised to purify the skin and calm the nerves, though it had the unfortunate side effect of burning through wallpaper if spilled. Housewives compared notes. It tingles so much, it must be working. If you can still feel your face after 5 minutes, add more. Of course, for every miracle, there was a matching disaster. Hair tonic for thinning locks often included ingredients banned from use in modern lawn care. Complexion water might brighten your skin for a day, then leave it permanently magenta by week's end. Some creams doubled as disinfectants or furniture restorer. This wasn't a coincidence. If you found the same label in the kitchen, bathroom, and stables, you knew you'd stumbled on a true Victorian multitasker, if not an actual chemical hazard. Advertising was relentless. Newspapers, magazines, and handbills overflowed with testimonials from suspiciously glowing customers who claimed to be entirely renewed after just one bottle. Dramatic before and after sketches, photographs were for the unimaginative, showed miraculous transformations. Bald men with wild new hair, wrinkled cheeks now as smooth as porcelain. Some testimonials even came from countesses or maharajas that no one had ever heard of, but surely knew their way around a pot of mercury cream. And then there were the side effects. Complaints ranged from itching and redness to the sudden urge to sleep for days on end. If you contacted the professor, he'd reassure you with a new bottle. This one improved, and maybe even a little more expensive. If the rash persisted, well, perhaps you were using it incorrectly, or your constitution was too delicate for such powerful remedies. Some patent medicines achieved legendary status, passed down like family secrets. The logic was charming. If it hadn't killed your grandmother, surely it could do you no lasting harm. And after all, every beauty risk was worth it, if it meant keeping up with the neighbours, or at least winning a round of whose eyebrows fell out last. By the end of the Victorian day, your shelf overflowed with miracle products, each promising beauty, youth, and the faint scent of industrial solvent. You might not have found the fountain of youth, but you certainly found enough potions to run your own side business as a paint stripper, or, at minimum, keep the neighbourhood cats at bay. So next time you see a miracle cure advertised in perfect script, remember, if it doubles as furniture polish, you're getting your money's worth, just maybe not in the way you hoped. Beauty wasn't just personal, it was social warfare. Fail to keep up with trends, and you risked ridicule, exclusion, or worse, being mistaken for healthy. Keeping up meant endless spending, constant risk, and more than a little creative lying. In the Victorian world, looking good wasn't about vanity. It was about survival. Every day, you woke up not just to face the mirror, but to face society. A relentless tribunal of aunts, neighbours, and that one lady who claimed to be descended from Plantagenets but was clearly descended from the local gossip mill. It wasn't enough to be clean or even pleasant. You needed to look delicate, ethereal, and, preferably, one step away from needing a fainting couch at all times. The real battle took place in drawing rooms, tea parties, and church pews. Here, every glance became a silent scorecard. Was your skin too pink? Suspicious. Had you been outdoors like a servant? Too pale? Was that arsenic glow, or just the first sign of something contagious? Fashion dictated that your cheeks be artfully rouged, your hair elaborately arranged, and your dress perfectly tailored to whatever bizarre silhouette was in vogue that week. If your bustle was too modest or your corset too loose, someone would notice, and probably mention it in next week's prayer circle. Then there was the spending. Victorian beauty was expensive and endless. Even if you made your own creams and powders. C. Recipes for disaster. You still had to buy the right ribbons, hairpins, combs, perfumes, and the occasional emergency tonic when your eyebrows fell out from mercury poisoning. The local chemist and the patent medicine peddler made a tidy profit off your insecurities, while you juggled bills and budgeted for this month's miracle skin water. You weren't just competing with your friends, you were competing with every illustration in Ladies' Home Journal and every portrait hanging in the parlour. Creative lying became a matter of necessity. No, of course my complexion is natural. Natural arsenic, natural lead, and naturally acquired via 3 hours of mixing powder in a locked bathroom. My hair? Just a little bare grease and sunshine, plus a wig, half a pound of powder, and the desperate hope that it wouldn't rain. The truth was taboo, especially if it involved secret boils, scalded lips, or the occasional episode of fainting due to corset-related oxygen deprivation. No one wanted to admit that looking effortlessly perfect required the kind of effort that usually results in workplace injuries. Social outings became performance art. The hours spent preparing for a ball or dinner party could rival those invested in actual employment. Women coached each other in the art of strategic lighting. Candlelight was forgiving, direct sunlight a merciless judge. There was even etiquette for handling beauty disasters. If your rouge melted down your cheek or your wig started itching in public, you excused yourself, repaired the damage, and returned with a serene smile, as if nothing had happened. To be unflappable was almost as important as being beautiful. Even men felt the squeeze. Mustache not waxed to perfection. Scandalous. Shoes not shiny enough to see your faint, desperate reflection. Social death. The gentleman's club was less a place of leisure and more a chamber of subtle judgment, where the quality of one's hair oil could determine one's standing. All this pressure took its toll. Beneath the polite conversation and fluttering fans, everyone was quietly exhausted, financially, emotionally, and sometimes physically, thanks to whatever was bubbling in their latest jar of complexion cream. The real secret was that almost nobody ever felt they measured up. Even the Queen herself reportedly kept her own personal stockpile of beauty aids, just in case. So, as you lie awake at night, face slathered in animal fat cold cream, pondering whether your latest beauty investment will finally win over your peers, take comfort in one thing: you were never alone. In the Victorian social pressure cooker, everyone was just one powder puff away from a crisis. And tomorrow, the game would begin again. One bustle, one brushstroke, one whispered fib at a time. The final ritual: scraping off layers of powder, grease, and regret. Victorian makeup remover was often just olive oil or lard, vigorously applied with a rough towel. If your skin still felt like yours afterward, you clearly weren't trying hard enough. It's the end of a long Victorian day. You've survived the powdered arsenic, endured your corset's best attempts at organ rearrangement, and fielded a dozen compliments about your glowing, read mildly radioactive complexion. Now comes the ultimate challenge: getting all that beauty off your face so you can sleep, breathe, and perhaps, for a fleeting moment, remember what your pores once felt like. You sit at your dressing table, lamps flickering and shadows dancing across the jars, bottles, and brushes strewn in organized chaos. The mirror is smudged, but no matter, you know the damage by heart. It begins with the makeup remover, Victorian style. Forget today's gentle micellar water or aloe wipes. Here, your options are straightforward and alarming: a tin of olive oil, a slab of animal lard, or, if you're feeling fancy, a pot of almond paste. None of them smells particularly appealing, but that's the price of beauty, or, at least, survival. You scoop a generous dab of grease onto your fingertips and start massaging it into the layers of powder, rouge, and face paint. The feeling is part exfoliation, part archaeological dig. With each pass, you unearth another stratum of product. First, the chalky dust of your arsenic powder, then the slightly oily residue of your lead-based foundation, and, if you're lucky, the faint trace of last week's freckle eraser. Your face glistens in the lamplight, looking less like a socialite and more like Sunday roast. The next step is removal, an act that requires both commitment and upper body strength. You reach for your towel, coarse, slightly damp, and just abrasive enough to remind you that the concept of gentle cleansing hadn't quite reached Victorian England. You scrub, and scrub, and scrub some more, pausing only to wince as your skin protests, your cheeks redden, and your eyebrows, if you still have them, threaten to migrate for safer territory. Every Victorian beauty guide offers advice here, though none of it comforting. A healthy glow may follow a vigorous rub-down. Translation: minor rug burn is a sign you're doing it right. If a layer of skin comes away, be grateful for the exfoliation. You wonder, not for the first time, how much of your face is actually left and how much is simply clinging to the towel in a paste of regret and beeswax. The good news? Once most of the makeup is off, your skin can finally breathe, assuming you haven't accidentally sealed your pores with a combination of wax and fatigue. The bad news? Your pillowcase is now a canvas of accidental modern art, smeared with reds, whites, and streaks of questionable yellow from the mysterious miracle tonic you tried that afternoon. Tomorrow's laundry will be another adventure in disappointment. And what if, on a particularly exhausting night, you skip the whole ritual and collapse into bed with your full face on? The consequences are immediate and legendary. By morning, you wake up feeling as if your skin is wearing a mask, and not the fun masquerade kind. Breakouts, rashes, and pillow imprints are your reward, and you'll spend breakfast wondering if there's a patron saint of skincare emergencies. Still, there's a secret satisfaction in this ritual. Each night, as you scrape away the armor of powders and paints, you reveal not just your face, but your resilience. The world may demand perfection, but in this quiet moment, you can acknowledge the effort and the utter absurdity of it all. So, as you set down your greasy towel and glance in the mirror, red-faced and slightly raw, remember, true Victorian beauty wasn't about the paint. It was about the dedication, the endurance, and the ability to laugh at your own reflection, even if you're not entirely sure whose face is staring back at you. Want to look wide awake after a late night at the opera or the world's most boring poetry recital? Victorians reached for eye brighteners, homemade eye drops brewed from belladonna. These handy drops dilated your pupils for that alluring, glassy stare and also blurred your vision, made you dizzy, and might have led to total blindness by season's end. Looking good truly was a hazard. The Victorians were nothing if not inventive in their pursuit of beauty, and nowhere was this more obvious than in their approach to the eyes. The so-called windows to the soul were expected to be bright, clear, and dramatically wide. Anything less, and you risked being mistaken for a tired governess or a sleep-deprived stable boy. That simply wouldn't do. So, in a moment of collective brilliance, or, more accurately, collective madness, society turned to the garden for inspiration. There, growing innocently among the daisies, was the belladonna plant. Belladonna, also known as deadly nightshade, already had a sinister reputation. Its berries were poison, its leaves a favourite ingredient in witches' brews, and the name literally means beautiful woman. This was enough to convince Victorian ladies that it must be the secret to a dazzling gaze. Beauty magazines gushed over the irresistibly luminous effect of the drops, as if blurred vision and accidental collisions with furniture were minor inconveniences on the road to romance. The ritual was simple, if terrifying. You'd tip your head back, delicately squeeze a drop or two into each eye, and wait for the magic to happen. Within minutes, your pupils expanded to dinner plate size, giving you that dewy, adoring, perpetually startled look prized by portrait painters and shy suitors alike. There was a certain glamour to stumbling through the parlour, clutching a teacup with both hands because you could no longer see the saucer. If someone asked, you merely batted your glassy eyes and whispered, "It's just the opera. I hardly slept at all." Unfortunately, the side effects were less poetic. Your vision became dreamy and indistinct. The room developed a soft haze, which was helpful if your host's wallpaper was particularly offensive, but less ideal if you hoped to recognize your friends from your furniture. Dizziness, dry mouth, and a pounding heart were par for the course, and some particularly unlucky souls discovered that a little belladonna went a long way, straight to the local doctor. A touch of blindness is a small price to pay for allure, the fashion columns hinted, in the kind of advice best ignored by anyone with a healthy respect for depth perception. For gentlemen, the pressure was less intense, but some couldn't resist the trend. After all, what better way to woo a lady than by gazing at her soulfully, while secretly trying to remember how many candlesticks are between you and the exit? Stage actors loved belladonna's effect too, finding that their on-stage stares grew ever more passionate as their ability to see their cues grew ever less reliable. Medical professionals tried to intervene. Warnings circulated that prolonged use could lead to headaches, permanent blurred vision, and in rare cases, total blindness. Did this stop anyone? Not really. If you already wore arsenic face powder, a dab of belladonna felt almost wholesome by comparison. And besides, A dramatic fainting spell was always good for conversation, especially if it could be blamed on delicate nerves rather than botanical self-sabotage. Removing belladonna from the Victorian beauty routine was slow and stubborn. Some held on for years, convinced that their popularity at balls and soirees depended entirely on their owl-like gaze. Eventually, however, medical science and common sense prevailed. Or, more accurately, people ran out of furniture to trip over and realized that seeing where you're going is occasionally useful. So, as you prepare for bed, eyes finally at rest, pupils returning to human size, consider the lengths Victorians went to for beauty. In their world, looking good wasn't just a daily battle. It was an ongoing negotiation with the limits of human anatomy, and occasionally, good sense. If a little temporary blindness was the price of glamour, well, at least you looked fantastic walking into the wall. Manicures weren't about coloured polish, but scraping, buffing, and bleaching your nails with acids and even a hint of, surprise, mercury. Buffing pads were made from chamois leather or actual shark skin, and whitening pastes promised pearly nails if you didn't mind a little burning sensation or losing the tip of a finger. Red nails? For actresses and the wrong sort of women, and you really didn't want to be either. Step into your Victorian beauty regime, and it quickly becomes clear nail care was less spa day and more hazardous workplace. In an era when hands tell the story of a lady's refinement, you were judged by your cuticles as much as your corset lines. But unlike today, when a quick coat of polish brings instant transformation, the 19th century manicure was a slow march through grit, grease, and occasional chemical burns. Let's start with the basics. Shape and buff. File your nails to a delicate oval using the finest tool at your disposal, if you're lucky, an imported steel file. If not, a knife that moonlights as a cheese slicer. The goal is a soft, subtle curve, not too long, never pointy, unless you want to be accused of witchcraft. Once shaped, it's time to buff, using pads made from chamois leather, felt, or, for the truly ambitious, shark skin. The last option comes with a free exfoliation of the knuckles and a burning sensation that says, yes, I'm suffering for beauty. After buffing comes the bleaching, an ordeal worthy of its own Gothic novel. A pearly white nail was the mark of leisure, proof you'd never so much as touched a potato or, heaven forbid, soil. To achieve this look, Victorian women relied on homemade whitening pastes. The ingredients read like a laundry list of mild poisons: lemon juice, sting, oxalic acid, burn, and, naturally, a touch of mercury for that extra gleam. You'd rub the paste on each nail, then wait for the magical tingling, which was either the formula working or your fingertips quietly disintegrating. If you finished with all 10 still attached, congratulations. You were winning at Victorian self-care. But don't forget the cuticles. Here, too, the advice columns went wild. Push them back with a wooden stick, then soften with a mix of almond oil and lard, or for those pressed for time, plain goose grease. If a hangnail appeared, you had two options: cut it off with the same knife you used for lunch, or soak your fingers in diluted ammonia and hope for the best. Infection was common, and if your finger swelled up, the doctor would nod sympathetically and say, well, at least you tried. Manicures weren't just for women. Gentlemen with aspirations to elegance were expected to have clean, well-shaped nails, though never so shiny as to attract attention. If a man's hands looked too well-tended, he risked being mistaken for an actor, a poet, or something even less reputable. Real men might discreetly buff in the privacy of their bedrooms and would never, under any circumstances, bleach. And what about colour? Painted nails were scandalous, reserved only for the stage or ladies of the night. A single dab of rouge on your fingertip could trigger a week of gossip, and possibly a stern talking to from your clergyman. Natural was the only acceptable hue, even if natural required 3 kinds of acid and a light sandblasting. The end result? Hands that looked lovely by candlelight, at least from a distance. Up close, the story was less polished. Reddened cuticles, the odd missing patch of skin, and a faint medicinal smell that followed you like a guilty secret. You learned to pose your hands artfully, hide any disasters, and pretend you'd been born with fingers as white and smooth as porcelain. So as you lay out your chamois pad and contemplate another round of buffing, remember, in Victorian England, the path to beauty was always a little rough around the edges, just like your fingertips. Victorian hair was an ecosystem, and not a friendly one. The average person's scalp was a war zone of oils, powders, dead skin, and the occasional critter. Dandruff remedies included brisk brushing, vinegar rinses, and various ointments with more side effects than results. If you could walk through your own home and leave a trail of Victorian snow, you were right on trend. Let's set the scene. It's a brisk morning in 1874, and you awaken with the unmistakable feeling of scalp discomfort, the Victorian itch, as it's sometimes delicately called. Your pillow bears the ghostly outline of last night's bare grease pomade, and your shoulders are dusted with something that, in a different context, might be festive. But here, in the cold grey light of an unheated bedroom, it's just dandruff, a perennial companion, and an equalizer for rich and poor alike. Your hairbrush awaits, a heavy, boar-bristled club that's seen more action than the family poker table. The first order of business is the daily 100 strokes, a number plucked from thin air by beauty columnists and strictly enforced by mothers, aunts, and well-meaning friends. You set to work, brushing with gusto, dislodging flakes, and distributing scalp oils down the length of your hair. The theory: vigorous brushing cleanses the scalp and stimulates growth. The reality: your lap and vanity now resemble a light snowfall, and your brush, after a single pass, is best described as Yeti chic. But that's only the beginning. Victorian wisdom, always eager to make things worse, recommends a vinegar rinse for tonic effect. You pour a mixture of cider vinegar and cold water over your scalp, bracing yourself for the sting and the pungent aroma that will linger until tomorrow's beauty campaign. The upside? The vinegar does help loosen stubborn flakes. The downside? You now smell faintly of salad, and depending on how enthusiastically you've rinsed, your eyes are watering. The market is flooded with dandruff remedies, each promising miracles and delivering mostly confusion. There are ointments, thick, waxy substances containing mysterious oils, ammonia, and the ever-popular coal tar. You massage a bit into your scalp and instantly regret it. The tingling, the burning, the vague suspicion that you've just invented a new kind of floor polish, all part of the fun. Advertisements promise that one application will leave the scalp as clean as driven snow, but neglect to mention the increased risk of rash, hair loss, or accidental combustion if you sit too close to the fireplace. And then there are powders, starch, flour, or even talc, meant to soak up oil and freshen your roots. The effect is dramatic. Your hair feels lighter, smells vaguely edible, and leaves a gentle dust cloud behind wherever you go. It's not unusual to be followed by a procession of sneezing relatives and curious house cats. Socially, dandruff is both common and, paradoxically, unspeakable. Everyone has it, but no one admits to it. At a dinner party, you'll find guests subtly brushing flakes from their sleeves under the tablecloth or engaging in sudden, vigorous scratching disguised as a yawn. Etiquette guides are clear. Should one observe snow upon a neighbour's person, avert your gaze and comment only upon the weather. Desperate cases call for desperate remedies. A neighbour swears by turpentine. An aunt recommends lye soap. Someone in the family tree tries egg yolks, while another cousin briefly considers sandpaper. Results vary, and so does the amount of scalp left at the end of each experiment. In the privacy of your own home, though, you eventually accept the inevitable. Victorian hair, layered with grease, powder, and the ghosts of failed beauty trends, was always going to be a little flaky. You shake out your nightcap, fluff your hair, and step into the day, leaving a faint trail of dandruff wherever you go. So if you ever wonder why Victorian rooms had so many rugs, now you know they were for catching the indoor snow, and if someone compliments your wintry shoulders, just nod knowingly. You're not behind the times, you're right on trend. Nothing says luxury like strapping a vibrating clockwork contraption to your face and hoping for eternal youth. Victorian face massagers promised to rouse the circulation and banish wrinkles, but mostly left you red, startled, and possibly with a minor concussion. For best results, try not to tangle your hair in the gears unless you were already planning to revisit segment 5, the battle against baldness. In an era obsessed with both scientific marvels and visible signs of refinement, it was inevitable that someone would combine the two, birthing the Victorian mechanical face massager. Picture the scene. You, perched at your dressing table in the golden glow of gaslight, clutching a polished brass and steel object that looks equal parts dental instrument and medieval restraint device. Advertised in glossy magazine pages and guaranteed to revitalize tired skin, these gadgets were marketed with the kind of breathless optimism usually reserved for miracle cures and discount funeral plots. The process begins with winding. Some massagers required a delicate touch with a tiny key. Others ran on a spring mechanism activated by a lever or a squeeze bulb. You place the contraption against your cheek, feeling the cold, unyielding metal settle against your skin. A quick flick of the switch, and you're off to the races, literally. The machine hums, rattles, and vibrates, setting your facial muscles aquiver in a way that's equal parts invigorating and deeply alarming. Victorian beauty columns swore by these devices. Rouse the blood, they proclaimed. Return youthful bloom to faded cheeks. They promised wrinkle removal, jawline sharpening, and general constitutional fortitude. Some even hinted that frequent use might improve your disposition, help digestion, or, if you believed the most hopeful advertisements, make you a better conversationalist. Because nothing says magnetic personality like someone whose face is still jiggling well after the conversation has moved on. Of course, reality had other ideas. The vibrating rollers and poking arms often left your face blotchy and red, with a strange tingling sensation that lingered for hours. More than a few users reported minor bruising, an involuntary twitch that persisted through dinner, or the deeply Victorian sensation of general malaise. Some massagers, fitted with tiny prongs and spinning brushes, were less gentle and more exfoliating. If you managed to avoid tangling your hair in the gears, you still had to worry about pinching a cheek or getting your earring yanked straight through your lobe. A particularly robust session could jolt your nerves and make your teeth chatter, not to mention inspire a round of laughter from curious onlookers. It was an open secret among the upper crust. If you spotted a neighbor at breakfast looking unusually flushed or blinking rapidly, you could be sure they'd spent the previous evening experimenting with the family's latest mechanical marvel. The face massager did wonders for me, they'd announce, while quietly dabbing at a forming bruise or massaging a pulled jaw muscle under the table. Yet for all the chaos, the allure remained. The face massager was a status symbol, a conversation starter, and a bold declaration that you were committed to the modern pursuit of beauty, even if it left you dazed, confused, and possibly with fewer working facial nerves than when you began. The most fashionable households displayed their devices in pride of place, alongside silver brushes and crystal perfume bottles, like trophies won in a battle against time and common sense. In the end, the miracle of the mechanical face massager was not so much the promise of eternal youth, but the sheer Victorian optimism that anything, no matter how ridiculous, might just work if you applied it with enough hope and elbow grease. So tonight, as you unstrap the latest clockwork contraption from your face and examine the new constellation of red spots in the mirror, congratulate yourself. You are at the cutting edge of history's greatest beauty experiment. And if tomorrow your cheeks still jiggle every time you sneeze, just chalk it up to improved circulation. Victorian innovation always left its mark. So, you've survived a day in Victorian England. Congratulations. You've painted your face with poison, powdered your hair with regrets, and probably inhaled enough lead dust to light up the next century. Your breath smells faintly of chalk. Your teeth ache with every heartbeat, and your pillowcase looks like a Jackson Pollock of cold cream and anxiety. Through it all, you've done your best to keep up with the beauty standards of a society that considered fainting a compliment and blindness a minor side effect. Take a deep breath. Just not too deep, or you'll catch a whiff of that arsenic face powder still lingering in the air. Let your shoulders drop. Close your eyes for a moment and remember, the past is behind us for a reason. Tonight, as you settle into your clean bed with sheets that won't peel your skin off, maybe spare a grateful thought for your ancestors who risked it all for a whiter complexion, a redder lip, or the hope of waking up with eyebrows still attached. Because while Victorian beauty routines were a strange combination of wishful thinking and low-level chemical warfare, they're also proof of something much deeper. Our stubborn, sometimes ridiculous, always hopeful desire to look our best, no matter the risk or the era. People have always endured a little suffering to feel beautiful, even if it means slathering on something labeled guaranteed not to kill you quickly. So next time you reach for your gentle cleanser or safe, boring toothpaste, give thanks that you live in an age where glow-up doesn't involve actual glowing from radiation. As you drift off tonight, remember, history may be absurd, sometimes tragic, sometimes hilarious, but the people who lived it were survivors. They endured rashes, regret, and rogue face cream, so you don't have to. Good night, sleep tight, and may your dreams be free of corsets, carmine, and anything labeled miracle beauty tonic. You've earned it.